Hey folks, this is Kalani. In this video we're going to go through all of the crafting professions in the War Within to see which ones have the most interesting new options, what each profession is going to bring to the table, which ones don't have too much going on right now, and which items might make you a boatload of gold in the new expansion. There were some very powerful items in Dragonflight that made some folks a lot of gold, like the Elemental Lariat early on or rank 3 Prismatic Gems. So let's go through each profession, see what the best crafting options are going to be, and which items might just be that next big gold mine. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit up that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. Let's go through things in alphabetical order, starting with Alchemy. We'll have plenty of potions, flasks and cauldrons to make sharing with your raid or party much easier. The potions are fairly standard, one of each kind of player or role, and there aren't any super new effects going on here. The flasks are also a bit boring for the most part. There's one for each secondary stat, and then there's one that lets you trade some secondary stats away to get more of your best stats, so that's kind of interesting, and then there's one for healers as well. Flasks have been a good source of gold for the folks who can move big numbers, though it may be easier to get some good gold this time without the rank 3 RNG from Dragonflight. There are also PvP specific flasks with a bunch of different effects, including increasing the honor you can earn or letting you get revenge on people who kill you, which will definitely be a bit of a surprise the first few times you see it. There will also be vials, which are basically just flasks but for crafting stats, which could be worth using this time as they seem to be quite cheap, and there's also one that reveals camouflaged mining and herbing nodes, so that's kind of interesting. But perhaps the most important alchemy recipes could be the transmutations. Transmuting seems to be the only way to get your hands on Blasphemite that I've found so far, which is the new epic gem used in high tier crafts. You can only make it by combining transmutagens, which only seem to come from actually transmuting other stuff. So you have to be transmuting to get the stuff you need to transmute the epic gem, so you're going to have to spend a lot of time with the transmuting portion of alchemy if you want to get your hands on that recipe and the resulting epic gem, which could end up making you a lot of gold if you get into it early enough. The Alchemist Stone Trinket will be returning as well, so you can pick that up if you really want to, but it's nothing too special. Moving on, Blacksmithing has some interesting options. To start with, they have this new kind of buff called the Ever-Burning Forge. This is actually an entire specialization tree, so you can power this buff up to provide you with some pretty big bonuses. I guess the fantasy here is that you ignite or stoke the forge to gain these buffs for 30 minutes, and then you have a large cooldown until you can do it again. So you're going to want to gather your materials, set yourself up as best you can, then craft with these big buffs in play. That's kind of cool. Outside of that, Blacksmithing doesn't have too much going on. You can still create all of the plate gear that you would expect and pretty much every melee weapon, so you can set yourself up as a master weaponsmith and get everyone's weapons made, but it's nothing that we haven't seen from Dragonflight. There are a handful of embellished gear pieces you can make, including a shield, a pair of boots, and a dagger, but how valuable these will be will depend on embellishment tuning, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And then there are also a lot of profession equipment pieces and tools that blacksmiths cover, so you can probably make some good gold with that if you get the recipes early enough. That's kind of all blacksmithing has going on though, so nothing too exciting when compared to some of the others. Next up is Enchanting, which is laid out a bit differently than we're used to. Instead of being separated into gear slot enchants, they're separated into where they come from in the new zones. That makes it a bit harder to see which enchants are for which gear pieces quickly, but I like that enchants are themed after the various races that we'll be interacting with in the new expansion. There are a lot of enchants for a bunch of different gear slots, and Enchanting has always been a good gold maker if you can get the tier 3 enchants made early on. You'll have to put in quite a bit of work, but you can also make a lot of gold if you know what you're doing, but on the other side it can also be a money pit if you don't, so you'll have to make a decision kind of early on in the expansion. The Authority weapon enchants look kinda cool and could be very powerful. There are various different ones that will provide you with different effects and benefits, but this will also just come down to number tuning. The best enchants are the ones that provide the most throughput without much wiggle room really, so that won't be easy to narrow down until the expansion is fully underway. We are going to see the return of enchanted crests, which are used to upgrade higher item level crafted gear, so those will be very valuable once again. You can make some pretty easy gold just from enchanted crests if you get the recipes fairly early on. And then the only other craft or recipe of interest is going to be the Gleeful Glamour. These are a new costume style consumable that turn you into the Glamour race, so there's one for each playable race and allied race. These let you become pretty much any race in the entire game, so if you really want to play around as a Night Elf on the Horde side, or maybe a Draenei or a Blood Elf on Alliance, you can do that with these Glamours. Sadly, they do have a cooldown of 2 hours, and they only last for a maximum of 1 hour, so the max uptime you can achieve is only 50%, but it's still going to be a lot of fun stocking up on these before dungeon runs or raids to add to my costume collection. That's kind of it for Enchanting though, nothing too crazy going on in the War Within. Engineering is up next, and they have a lot of gear to facilitate the use of their tinkers. There'll be helms and braces again for every armor type, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But what's weird right now is that there aren't many actual tinkers that I can see or find. There are only 2, so I'm not sure if you can use Dragonflight Tinker still, or if your options are just going to be quite limited for the War Within. Maybe more will get added before the expansion goes live though. Engineers will also have quite a few profession tools and equipment pieces, so they could make some very good money there. There's going to be a new engineer mount, which has historically been a pretty big gold mine for those players who can unlock these kinds of recipes early and start churning out the materials and ingredients required for the mounts. And then a really cool new option for engineers are these potion bombs. Potion bombs share a cooldown with your potions, but instead of just providing you with a benefit, they can be used on up to 5 players at a time. There are 3 potion bombs, one that increases your primary stat, another one that increases healing received by up to 10%, and then the third one increases movement speed by up to 15%. Each potion bomb also deals damage to any enemies caught in the radius. These are very interesting for a few reasons. First, they're going to allow you to use that potion cooldown to buff your party or raid members instead of just yourself. That gives you a lot more flexibility in how you want to maximize those cooldowns. You can increase your healing directly instead of relying on a stat boost, you can help speed up your party through a dungeon, or you can trade your personal damage boost for a party damage boost, which could be great for tanks or healers especially, who may not benefit quite as much from a primary stat boost. So they can share the love, give your 3 DPS a larger boost so they can take down bosses and trash even faster. This will all depend on numbers and whether it's actually worthwhile buffing 5 players instead of using a single potion on 1 player, but I think for the tanks and healers especially, they could see some great use out of these potion bombs, and it just adds more utility that they can bring to any group. We'll also have a lot of devices to tinker around with. There are various toys to add to your collection, but the more useful ones are more interesting to me. We have a new pair of jumper cables, so every engineer gets to at least try and battle res their allies. The irresistible red button gives you easy wipe recovery, which will be great for raid bosses especially. The pausing pylons will pause the duration of any food buffs, flasks or vials, so that could help keep your buffs rolling while you're not in combat. Maybe you're talking about strategy at a raid boss or just recovering from a wipe. So that's kind of cool. There's a new repair bot, as you would expect, and then the last item here is a portable profession table. The engineer who puts it down gets to choose which profession the table mimics, so they can use any other profession out in the field as well. So engineers have quite a lot of cool new stuff to look forward to. Then we come to Inscription, which has a few very important changes. Let's start by talking about Dark Moon cards and decks, because I think this is the first time we won't actually be making cards at all. There are no recipes to create Dark Moon cards for this expansion, and we don't have the box trinkets that we had in Dragonflight. It seems like Dark Moon cards are only found in the new zones or dungeons as random drops. Now, scribes will still have a big advantage over other players though, because they can specialize to increase the drop rates of cards, and there are quite a few 50% increases here, so if you specialize into Dark Moon cards, you should see a lot more cards start to drop. You can also find these crusty Dark Moon cards while fishing, and when you open them you can get any of the new Dark Moon cards too, so that is one other source. You're also going to be able to transcribe cards into other cards, so you can take any card and turn it into a random card of another deck, which could help balance out the value of each card and help keep them kind of equal. You can combine your cards into decks as per usual to create the trinkets, and each trinket starts at item level 577 right now. There don't seem to be any ways to upgrade them this time though, so you won't be able to use them as a trinket slot for very long, unless they are crazy powerful, which, let's be honest, they have been in some expansions, but that's going to come down to numbers and tuning. What is interesting is that you can turn your deck into an embellishment item, which you can then add to crafted gear. So you can turn the deck's effects into one of your embellishment options. This will be only a portion of the effects, so it won't be as potent as the trinket itself, but they could still be very powerful options for your 2 embellishments, so that's really cool. You better put these on a really good piece of crafted gear though, because recreating that embellishment with the deck will cost you a very pretty penny. Inscription will also be able to create the treatise items to help every crafter unlock more profession knowledge. Missives for crafted gear and profession tools are also still a thing, so we'll be relying on scribes to pick specific stats on crafted stuff. And then the Vantus runes are sticking around as well, so those should be valuable to all of the raiders struggling on big bosses. Depending on how powerful those Darkmoon card embellishments are going to be, Inscription could make some very good gold in the War Within. Moving on to Jewelcrafting, this one is probably exactly as you expect. We're going to see another socket item, the Magnificent Jeweler's Setting, but this time instead of just adding 3 sockets to a necklace, we'll be able to add 2 sockets to each jewelry piece. So 2 for your neck and then 2 for each ring. There aren't any tiers or ranks this time too, so you don't have to worry about that. We'll also have primary stat gems again, but instead of having secondary stats, they will have special effects. So you can get crit per unique gem color, movement speed per unique gem color, or maximum mana per unique gem color. I imagine most folks will opt for the crit one, but at least there are some semi-interesting options here. You'll also be able to make rings and neck pieces as per usual, so those could be good for spark, crafting, and higher item level jewelry options later on. And there is a special new ring, which may just be our next lariat. The Binding of Binding allows you to bind yourself to another user of the ring, so you both need one, and then the binding can only be broken by using a Blasphemite, which isn't going to be cheap, so you better bind with someone important. While bound with another player, you both have a chance to empower each unique gem color of your allies' socketed gems, granting them secondary stats for 15 seconds. If you get 500 secondary stats per gem color, that could end up being a very significant buff. The ring does count towards your embellishment cap though, so this will again all come down to numbers and what provides the best bang for your buck. Note that these special effects all refer to unique gem colors, so I guess the dev team is trying to stop us from just stacking one gem color in every slot. We'll also have a lot of gems to cut as per usual. You're going to have to specialize into gem cutting to get most of them unlocked though. And then we also have some profession equipment in here too, so quite a few interesting items for the jewel crafters this time around. Then we come to leatherworking, which doesn't really have much going on. You'll be able to craft all of your typical leather and mail gear as per usual, so good for spark crafting later on. There are quite a few special pieces of crafted gear, but none of them currently count towards your embellishment limit, which I assume is a bug, because that's how all other kind of gear has worked throughout Dragonflight. Anything with a special effect on it typically counts to your embellishment limit. So all of this stuff is probably going to compete with everything else we've mentioned, but one of these pieces may end up being quite powerful. It's all going to come down to that balance and tuning. There are also quite a few profession equipment recipes, so that could be a good source of gold if you unlock the recipes early enough, but that's kind of it. There isn't too much going on with leatherworking this time around, and from what I can see, they don't even have the bow option that they did in Dragonflight, so if you're relying on your leatherworking to craft your weapon as a hunter, you'll actually have to find an engineer instead in the War Within. And then last on our list is Tailoring, which has some very interesting bags. More about that in just a moment. As we scroll down the list of recipes, the first thing that sticks out are these 2 sets of gear, Woven Dawn and Woven Dusk. They are both pairs of gloves and boots, you can choose the stats on both, and they have a special effect that can grant you 12,000 mastery for 30 seconds whenever you use healing spells or abilities. Woven Dusk does the same kind of thing, except it provides 12,000 haste for 30 seconds when you use DPS abilities, so these are some huge potential procs, but it will end up using both of your embellishment slots to actually get this set rolling. Curiously, there are some extra items here. If you equip the Warm Sunrise Braces with the Dawn set, the proc will be haste instead of mastery while healing, and then the Cool Sunset Braces change your Dusk proc into mastery instead of haste while dealing damage. So you can get either haste or mastery as healer or DPS, but you do have to equip quite a few pieces of crafted gear to get this going, but it is quite interesting. You can of course create and craft any cloth piece of gear too, which includes cloaks, so that can be a good source of gold as people want to get their spark gear crafted. There are quite a few pieces of profession gear in tailoring too, so for any other crafters wanting to max out their gear, they'll be coming to you. One of the most interesting additions here is an epic fishing line called the Elgari Weaver line. This allows you to power up your fishing rod by collecting other threads out in your adventures, so I guess if you really want to max out your fishing in the War Within, you'll need to pick up one of these lines from your local tailor. And then perhaps the most interesting new crafts that tailors will have are these new profession-specific bags. Each profession has a bag, and these are actual 38-slot bags that require some skill in the profession they will be buffing. Each bag provides a minor bonus to that profession, so things like increasing the chance to learn a new recipe, or reducing the cooldown on special things, or giving you a chance to get extra materials or reagents. They're quite small bonuses, but I imagine over the course of an expansion, these could really add up. So anyone who wants to really dive into their professions will be wanting to pick these up, and they're probably going to be quite expensive, so that's something to keep your eye on if you're an avid tailor. If you're curious, we will also have new recipes for 34 and 38 slot normal bags and 36 and 40 slot reagent bags, so our bags will be getting a little bit bigger as well. But that's the most interesting and potentially powerful new profession items and crafts coming in the War Within, so that's it for this video. Do any professions stand out to you right now, and have you decided which professions you're going to pick up as we head into the War Within? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating by on screen. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can find links in the description, or click the join button just below the video. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful in any way, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you're always kept up to date. Thanks for watching, folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.